Hello everyone! We continue our videos in which we talk about the Fethullahist terrorist organization and its dirty face. This week I will talk about the murder of Hrant Dink, one of the biggest political murders committed by the Fethullahist terrorist organization. If you are ready, here we go. On January 1919, 2007, a breaking news dropped like a bomb on the agenda in Turkey. Hrant Dink, the editor-in-chief of the Agos newspaper, had been murdered. Hrant Dink's assassination was predicted by those around him and by Hrant Dink himself. Hrant Dink had already written an article about it. Hrant Dink was a picture that was dragged through the court gates by taking his words out of context. Despite this, if people who do not show the slightest hostility towards Turkey, and even Europeans have started to praise me, if they praise me, there is something suspicious about this. He was a person who belonged to this country enough to say, "Why are these people patting my back?" He was a person of this country and he was killed in a dastardly attack.
He came, they kissed me. Why is the European kissing me? I thought to myself, am I complaining about my country to the Europeans, and something like this happened?
After the murder of Hrant Dink, the arrows immediately pointed to a certain group of people. It was the nationalists who took Hrant Dink to court. Hrant Dink's murderer was caught at Samsun bus terminal a short time later. That day, Samas was a man who was thought to be linked to the Grand Union Party and the Nizam-i Ocaklari. Shortly afterwards, Yasin Hayal and Erhan Tuncel, the men behind Samas, who Turkey had previously recognized in the bombing of the McDonald's in Trabzon, were caught. Sidon was actually solved in a short time, according to some people. And in Trabzon, some nationalist and sacrilegious kids had killed Hrant Dink because they thought he had insulted the Turkish nation. This is how the murder was covered up, and the nationalists of that time and the Ergenekon organization were held primarily responsible for the murder. The murder of Hrant Dink was already solved for some people, but there were some brave people who did not let this murder go. One of them was journalist Nedim Sener, and some people, led by Nedim Sener, started to reveal that there was negligence on the part of public officials in this murder, that some intelligence was covered up, and that some officials within the state did everything in their power to carry out this murder. And after this incident, we now know that the murder of Hrant Dink was carried out not by Ergenekon or by some figures connected to the Grand Union Party in Trabzon or the Nizam-i Ocaklari, but by the Fethullahist terrorist organization. In this sense, journalist Nedim Sener should be thanked for his persistence in pursuing this case. Nedim Sener is a man who was imprisoned by members of the Fethullahist terrorist organization for not covering up this murder, for investigating this murder. And we learn a lot of information today thanks to the work of brave journalists like Nedim Sener at that time. Many people, including Hrant Dink, knew that journalist Hrant Dink would be murdered, because Hrant Dink was describing in his newspaper articles that he was experiencing the anxiety of a pigeon and that he was threatened with death. He had a meeting with some state officials at the Istanbul governorship. It turns out that he received threats. However, for some reason, neither the Istanbul police nor the General Directorate of Security was making the slightest effort to protect Hrant Dink. At that time, Ramazan Akurek was the head of the police intelligence department. On the date Hrant Dink was murdered, Ramazan Akurek was the head of the police intelligence department. Let's start this story from the beginning once again. Who is Ogun Samas? Who is Yasin Hayal? Who is Erhan Tuncel? Why were these names chosen? Why was Ogun Samas chosen? And have similar murders like this one been committed before? Let's briefly explain these. Ramazan Akurek's name is frequently mentioned in videos about the secret police structure of the Fethullah Seller organization. In all the news reports, he is mentioned as one of the three names who established the secret police organization. He entered in the year 1974, and after serving as vice president of the police academy, Ramazan Akurek became Trabzon police chief in the year 2003. And what happened in Trabzon from the time when Ramazan Akurek became Trabzon police chief until the time when he was appointed as the head of the intelligence department of the police shows that the Fethullah Seller organization in Turkey actually used Trabzon as a laboratory and put into action in Trabzon to implement plans against Turkey. During Ramazan Akurek's tenure as Trabzon police chief, the McDonald's bombing took place and Yasin Hayal was caught in a short time. because Yasin Hayal had left his jacket next to the McDonald's building he bombed. Erhan Tonsel, Yasin Hayal's older brother, who was said to have hung out with Yasin Hayal in the Nizami Alem quarries, was also caught, and Erhan Tonsel made a statement that, yes, I gave this bomb. Yasin had a great energy, and I gave him a low-hazard bomb to release this energy, and with this bomb, let's let him release his energy without killing too many people. Nobody touched Erhan Tonsel, because Erhan Tonsel had been recruited by the Trabzon police as an auxiliary intelligence officer, that is, as an informant. The official date is right after the McDonald's bombing. However, Erhan Tonsel's background is that he was a person who studied in the schools of the FETO terrorist organization in Elazig, and stayed in the houses of the organization there. And then, after coming to Trabzon, he suddenly appears as a nationalist and sacredist young man who is a member of the Grand Union Party, or a Nizami Alamist from the Nizami Alem Okakli Nizami Alem, and starts to surround Yasin Hayal as an elder brother. He starts to work on Yasin Hayal in a subtle way. Yasin Hayal is also a very interesting personality, a person who has been involved in every kind of crime you can think of, from beating Raif Santoro with a chisel to beating his literature teacher in high school and breaking the jaw of the coach, who he claimed gave him tactics he didn't like when he watched a football match. Just before the McDonald's bombing, even before the McDonald's bombing, Yasin Hayal goes to court for another violent incident, and without being sentenced, his sentence is postponed and rescheduled to a later date. Is being removed. Yasin Hayal commits so many crimes, and in none of the crimes he commits do the victims file a complaint. One of them is Raif Santoro, who was murdered in Trabzon a year before Hrant Dink. Yasin Hayal beat Raif Santoro with a chisel handle. Despite this, he is not punished. The same Raif Santoro was murdered by a 16-year-old boy on 2006. A 16-year-old boy with a severe case of myopia shoots priest Santoro 3 times from a distance of 40 meters and kills him with a globe-marked pistol used by the United States of America in Iraq, and later disappeared. Nobody is investigating the absurdity of this murder. How does a 16-year-old boy get his hands on the assassination weapons used by the US Army in Iraq, those lost weapons? No one thinks about how those weapons could have fired from 40 meters with a sharp fire and killed this priest, even though he was 3 degrees nearsighted. One of those people is Trabzon Police Chief Ramazan Akvioglu, who quickly found the killer and became famous. In other words, 1 year before the murder of Hrant Dink, a priest is killed in a Trabzon-based incident. In other words, at a time when the Trabzon Police Department should have been on alert against cells living in Trabzon that were preparing attacks against non-Muslims, a person from Trabzon comes out and kills Hrant Dink, who was known to be killed in Istanbul, and for whom there was intelligence that he would be killed. No one investigated the oddities here for a long time. Journalists like Nedim Sena, who did investigate, were subjected to a lot of trouble, while Ramazan Akurek was following Yasin Hayal and the people around him through Erhan Tonsel, whom he made a police informant. He was also preparing a conspiracy. What was this plot? When Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu, the founding chairman of the Grand Union Party, came to Trabzon, efforts were made to ensure that Erhan Tonsel and Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu were in the same photo frame. Sometimes Erhan Tonsel was made to assume the role of Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu's host in Trabzon. Sometimes Erhan Tonsel was assigned as a bodyguard to Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu's car, and in this way, information documents were prepared in advance for the public as if there was a relationship between Erhan Tonsel and Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu. As a matter of fact, a year after Hrant Dink's murder, we came across news reports claiming that there was a connection between Erhan Tonsel and Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu. And at that time, Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu started to investigate this assassination, which was the cause of the helicopter crash that would later lead to his martyrdom, because Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu knew very well that neither he nor the people around him had the slightest instruction, insinuation, or encouragement to kill Hrant Dink. Some people were trying to pin this murder on Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu by recruiting some names from their own cadres through the people they had inserted into the Grand Union Party. We said that there were intelligence reports that Hrant Dink was going to be killed. Ramazan Akurek was the head of the Trabzon Security Directorate who prepared these reports. When Ramazan Akurek was arrested for this murder, he had already defended himself in that way. I prepared intelligence reports that Hrant Dink was going to be killed and sent them to the Istanbul Police Department and the General Directorate of Security. If no action is being taken on this, then Sabri Uzun, the head of the Security Intelligence Department at the time, he had initially defended himself by saying that I was the one responsible for this, that I had prepared and sent the reports. However, Ramazan Akurek said that shortly before this murder, he had been appointed as the head of the Security Intelligence Department, and Sabri Uzun was never asked why he did not bring these reports back to the agenda if he had covered up the incident and did not do anything about them. Sabri Uzun defended himself as follows: "Yes, I received intelligence about an attack on Hrant Dink, but there was no intelligence that he was going to be killed. Therefore, it was not possible for you to predict whether it would be an egg-laying incident or an egg-throwing incident or something else." Sabri Uzun says that if I had received an intelligence report that Hrant Dink was going to be killed, I would have acted on it. Let's pause here for a moment. You are the head of the Police Intelligence Department. A year ago, a priest was murdered in Trabzon, and you receive an intelligence report that a person who is involved in many crimes in Trabzon is preparing an attack against Hrant Dink. In that intelligence report, even if it says that a cake will be thrown at Hrant Dink, you have to take it seriously, because a priest was killed in that region a year ago, and you, as the head of the Security Intelligence Department in Turkey, have to consider the worst-case scenario, even if the report you receive says that he will not be killed. But Sabri Uzun did not do this. He claimed that the reports were hidden from him. The court acquitted him due to the statute of limitations. The deputies of the Security Intelligence Department who gave Sabri Uzun the reports on Hrant Dink's murder by destroying them were Recep Güvenli and Gürsel Aktepe, who had very active roles in the FETO terrorist organization. Sabri Uzun left the Security Intelligence Department after a short period of time. He was replaced by Trabzon Police Chief Ramazan Akurek, and Ramazan Akurek, he not only hid the intelligence reports that Hrant Dink would be killed, he also tried to block all information on Erhan Tuncer by deleting the log records of Erhan Tuncer as a police informant from 7 or 8 different computers. Ali Fatih Yilmaza hid the information about Hrant Dink's murder from his superiors in the Istanbul police. Ali Fatih Yilmaza's logic was this: there were a number of police officers in the Istanbul police who would prevent the Ergenekon operations that would start shortly after Hrant Dink's murder. This would pave the way for their liquidation. Hrant Dink would have been killed, some members of the Istanbul police would have failed to do their duty, and names like Ali Fatih Yilmaza would have shone through. This was Ali Fatih Yilmaza's first apparent plan, and this is why he did not process the tip from Trabzon police that there was an attack on Hrant Dink. Hrant Dink, the connivance of members of the Gulenists terrorist organization within the police force and their managers who are members of the Gulenists terrorist organization. In fact, he was killed because Erhan Tuncer and Yasin Hayal were incited. In fact, when Yasin Hayal was on trial in the Hrant Dink case, he made a statement that we thought we were doing something for the state. How should we know that those people in the state were enemies of the state? Yasin Hayal's criminal career paved the way for him to be easily manipulated by Erhan Tuncer, and just like in the murder of priest Santoro, a murderer under the age of 18 was chosen, Ogun Samas. Ogun Samas was under the age of 18, just like in the case of the Reverend Santoro, and was persuaded to commit the Hrant Dink murder by being told that he would not receive much punishment. However, Ogun Samas made some mistakes regarding the murder. How do we know that? Muhittin Zenit, who was the liaison between Erhan Tuncer and Ramazan Akurek, made a phone call to Erhan Tuncer on the day of the murder, saying that he had shot himself in the head, but it was a mistake to let him go and run away. In other words, the police officers of the Fethullahist terrorist organization working at the Trabzon Security Directorate at the time knew what Yasin Hayal's murder plan would look like and what Ogun Samas would do after the murder. For this reason, some workers from the Gendarmerie Intelligence Department were in the area when Ogun Samas committed the murder, even though they did not have official documents. We learned that those workers were close to the area where the murder was committed from phone records that were not given to us years later. The phone records were not given because Mazriak Tepe was in charge of the tip at the time. Mazriak Tepe, a member of the Fethullahist terrorist organization. In the Hrant Dink murder case, the gendarmerie did not hand over to the court for a long time the phone records. One of the most important pieces of evidence that the gendarmerie intelligence officers were in the murder area at the time of the murder, and that Ogun Samas had taken the camera. Journalist Hrant Dink had been murdered, and the murder had happened in plain sight. Fethullahist police chiefs in the Istanbul Police Department, the General Directorate of Security, and the Trabzon Police Department knew that the murder would be committed, who would commit it, and what would be done after the murder. However, Ogun Samas fled immediately after the murder and was caught at the bus station in Samsun shortly afterwards while trying to go to Trabzon. The killer, who wanted to commit one of the most important political murders in Turkey, was caught in Samsun bus station, and an image of Ogun Samas emerged after he was caught in the bus station. He and Ogun Samas, who was taken in with some police officers, were holding a Turkish flag, and they were egging Ogun Samas on. There were news reports saying, "My lion, my hero, my hero." Even the first person who circulated that video took a picture with the gendarmes at the gendarmerie station. Erkan Gündog, a police reporter for Fox TV, was the one who had reported that he took a picture with a Turkish flag and then corrected the news a day later to say that there were no gendarmes, only policemen, and circulated the video. Erkan Gündog had worked as a police reporter for Zaman newspaper for 10 years until shortly before the romantic murder, when he suddenly left Zaman newspaper and transferred to Fox TGT, which later became Fox TV, and started working as a police reporter for that channel. Erkan Gündog came to the forefront of public opinion that day as the person who circulated the video of Samaslan with a Turkish flag. He claimed that the police intelligence officers in Samsun had sent it to Ali Fuat Yilmaza on a disc, that Ali Fuat Yilmaza had transferred the footage to Halil İbrahim Koca, who was the lawyer of the Istanbul Security Directorate at the time, who continued to be the lawyer of the Istanbul Security Directorate until the December 1725 conspiracy, who gave lectures at the police academy and who is now a fugitive in England, and that Halil İbrahim Koca had attended a meeting at the Zaman newspaper with Ekrem Dumanli, Faruk Merkan, Adem Yavuz Aslan, and Erkan Gunun. In that meeting, he gave this footage to Erkan Gun and revealed that he wanted this footage to be disseminated through Fox TV. Erkan Gun, a Fox TV reporter who later rose to the position of Fox TV Special News Director, was arrested after the July 15 coup attempt and continued to receive money from Fox TV for years after his arrest. Erkan Gun's name continued to appear in the news bulletins. In fact, Fox TV's two successful news anchors, Fatih Portakal and Ismail Kushukaya, often sent their greetings to Erkan Gun by referring to his imprisonment. The same names also pay condolences for Hrant Dink every year on January 19 and talk about how difficult it is to be a journalist in Turkey. However, for years they also defended Erkan Gun, who manipulated the murder on behalf of the Fethullahist terrorist organization. There are many incidents to tell, including the murder of Hrant Dink. From the arrest of the forensic medical examiner who performed Hrant Dink's autopsy on the grounds that he was a member of the Fethullahist terrorist organization, to the journalist who reported on Hrant Dink's murder, to the journalist who wrote books. Adem Yavuz Aslan is a name who wrote a book on behalf of the Fethullahist terrorist organization to cover up Hrant Dink's murder, the existence of an Almini. A name that describes the murder of Hrant Dink in his book. A lot can be said about these. However, the following question will rightly be asked. You say that the Fethullahist terrorist organization killed my brother Hrant Dink. So why did the state actively work on the murder of Hrant Dink until the 1530 coup attempt? Or why did the state actively work on the murder of Hrant Dink until the December 1725 conspiracy? This information is wrong. At the request of the Hrant Dink family, the Prime Ministry Supervisory Board opened investigations into those who were guilty of this murder, those who were negligent in this murder. Members of the Prime Ministry Supervisory Board went to the Police Intelligence Department, went to Istanbul Police Intelligence, and processed documents on this murder. They were threatened by Ali Fatih Marza and Ramazan Alp Yurek because of their documents. Not only that, their phones were illegally tapped on the grounds that they were members of the Hezbollah terrorist organization. Threats were made against these names. Suspicions were raised against these names. And members of the Fethullahist terrorist organization did everything they could to cover up this investigation. Judges from the Gulenists terrorist organization dismissed the defendants brought to court by the state on the grounds that there was no organization. One of these judges was seen at the 14th High Criminal Court in Istanbul in the murder of the robbery. And Mustafa Besa was one of the first judges to rule that there was no organization, that there was no organized crime. Mustafa Baza was dismissed from his post for demanding the release of names such as Hidayet Karaka, Ali Fatih Marza, Ramazan Alp Yurek. And now he is in prison because he is a member of the Fethullahist terrorist organization, and his cancer has relapsed on social media. You are killing this man. An honorable Turkish judge is in prison just for making a decision. In other words, the judges in the murder of Hrant Dink were members of the Fethullahist terrorist organization. The prosecutors who initiated the investigation in the murder of Hrant Dink were also members of the Fethullahist terrorist organization. Muammar Karakus, Cihan Kansiz, Fikret Sesen were all members of the Fethullahist terrorist organization. Selahattin Chera, who was the police chief of Islam at the time, said that when Erhan Tuncel was caught and gave a statement to the police saying that he was a police informant, he called Ramazan Akur and said, "Ramazan, there is a person here who says that he works for security intelligence." When asked to come and interrogate this person with my men and reveal his role in this murder, Ramazan Akur replied, "I don't know such a person, brother, if he wants to be a police informant." He says that he made a statement saying that you should be recruited as informants for your own police, for the Istanbul police. There are members of the Fethullahist terrorist organization in the police intelligence department. The prosecutor who opened the investigation is a member of the Gulenist terrorist organization. The judges in the court are members of the Gulenist terrorist organization. The prosecutor who took over the investigation later is also a member of the Gulenist terrorist organization, and the state did not close this investigation for a long time, despite these people infiltrating the state. In 2012, Sabah newspaper reported that the Prime Ministry Inspection Board had uncovered the big brothers in the murder of Hrant Dink. When news was published that he had uncovered a number of parallel structures, people who identified themselves as friends of Hrant Dink were not at all concerned. The state didn't care about anything. In other words, the claims about the murder of Hrant Dink, that if the Fethullahist terrorist organization had not challenged the state, if the state and FETO had not fallen out, the state would not have thought of FETO are not true. Journalist Nedim Sener wrote a book about this. In fact, Faruk Merkan, who attended the meeting where the footage of Erkan Günün at the murder of Hrant Dink was taken, criticized Nedim Sener. He criticized him for investigating the role of police officers in the murder of Hrant Dink and tweeted something like this: "I am going to the Hrant Dink award ceremony." He tweeted this on 2011-2012. "I am going to the Hrant Dink award ceremony." Nedim Sener did not deserve this award. Erkan Tufan Aytav, another FETO operative, tweeted this: "Faruk Merkan and I are on our way to attend the Hrant Dink award ceremony." In other words, members of the FETO terrorist organization attend the funerals of people they have killed, put pressure on the public to investigate the killers of the people they have killed, and even claim that those killers are other people, a very complicated, despicable, and disgusting organization. Journalist Hrant Dink was murdered by the FETO terrorist organization on January 19, 2007. The murder of Hrant Dink was known by members of the FETO terrorist organization in the police, judiciary, bureaucracy, and gendarmerie. Intelligence reports on this were covered up. Some of them were camouflaged and circulated. Hrant Dink was prevented from receiving protection despite receiving threats. By killing journalist Hrant Dink, the FETO terrorist organization paved the way for legitimizing all the operations it would carry out in the future. It paved the way for the liquidation of bureaucrats within the state whom it saw as its rivals, journalist Hrant Dink. He was murdered by the FETO terrorist organization on January 19, 2007. Everything from who would carry out the murder, how it would be carried out, to whom the blame would be assigned after the murder, and who would be targeted for the operation was determined by FETO police chiefs and FETO spiritual architects. In order to provide legitimacy for the murder, names were even taken from the newspapers of the FETO Angle terror organization, and journalists were transferred to the relatively more secular, relatively more modern Fox TV. And today, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu is the chairman of the main opposition party. When he visits the Hrant Dink family, he claims that the real killers of Hrant Dink have not been found. In other words, he makes statements implying that Ali Fahat Yilmaza, Ramazan Aksurek, and the FETO police officers and FETO secret imams involved in this murder are innocent. And sadly, there was an organization that called itself the Friends of Hrant Dink. Very few people from this organization can bravely say that FETO is the murderer of journalist Hrant Dink. Most of the rest are today engaged in providing legitimacy to the terrorist organization FETO. In other words, a team that is trying to provide legitimacy to the murderers of their own friends. There are people who call themselves intellectuals. We will continue to tell the dirty face of the FETO Angle terrorist organization, the conspiracies and murders in which the organization is involved. To support us, don't forget to like our video, subscribe to our channel, turn on your notifications for new videos, and share this video on your social media accounts. Thank you for your support. See you in the next video.